This fella Ronaldo is a cod.
Arsene Wenger's been in Japan for a year. He doesn't know anything about English football.
I will love it if we beat them.
This is football heritage.
Con Giovanni, incredible. Dribble.
If you don't know the answer to that question, then I think you are an ostrich.
We're now halfway through the Euro 2020 qualification process. Many teams have already banked to playoff place due to their progress in the UEFA Nations League from last year, but for other teams, these next 2 months will decide everything. Hello and welcome to the Total Football Podcast. I'm your host, Declan Hart, and joining me today is Andrew Conway.
Hello.
Andrew, do you fancy Ireland's chances?
At this point, yeah, it's looking good. They came back and got a undeserved 1-1 draw against Switzerland last weekend.
Do you think it was undeserved?
Yeah, like they were dominated by Switzerland. They didn't really show much. They reek of a team in transition. Although they're transitioning to what, I don't know, because they don't seem to be changing majorly that much. They're very similar to the way they were under Martin O'Neill and laterally under Trapattoni. Like they play a defensive style of football that without much creativity. They lack a striker up front. As a result of that, they can't create much. They have good players in the side, and I think they've always had good players in the side, and they kind of roll in and roll out those good players. The likes of, in the past, we've had Robbie Brady, we have Hourihan now, we have Seamus Coleman has been ever present in that time. You know, these are quality Premier League level players, but that doesn't always translate to international football greatness or creativity for that matter. And the international teams do not play, like Ireland for instance, does not play the same way as a club side. And as a result, very little of the club form of these players ever transfers over. So they are very fortunate given how poorly they performed consistently through this campaign and through the last several years before Mick even took back over the team. They're lucky to be where they are, and they're lucky that even with this inflated Euros of 24 teams played across how many, 8 cities, 10 cities, whatever we're going to be at in next season, at the end of next season, or this season,
End of this season,
summer 2020. You know, they're very fortunate to be in the position where they can almost qualify, and it's more that teams with superior individual players cannot seem to match the same output as Ireland has managed. The likes of Denmark dropping points where they really shouldn't be dropping points. The likes of Switzerland dropping points where they really shouldn't be dropping points. Like player for player, they're better. They have Champions League experience throughout both of these international teams. But as I just said, club football doesn't matter as much when it comes to international football. Not anymore, at least. I think Iceland, if no one else, has shown that a team well ordered, well disciplined, well drilled can be better than the sum of their parts and can work to a system. Portugal winning the last Euros is proof of that even.
It was good to see David Goldrick get his first goal for Ireland as well.
Yeah.
And a late equaliser as well, an important match.
That's always great.
A good moment.
Yeah, that's always great. But we have those moments and they kind of paper over the cracks. Shane Long against Germany, John O'Shea against Germany, Richard Dunne against Russia, way back when. Like these are moments that pay, that they're like hiding the cracks underneath. There's like they're not playing well, they're not creating anything. They're relying on James McLean for creativity, and you know he's a goer and probably he's been one of Ireland's most consistent international performers over the last decade. But I don't know if that's really good enough to set the lights amongst, you know, set the cat amongst the pigeons, if you want, in terms of passion for international football in Ireland. Like it's a much bigger topic, and we'll probably return to it at a later international break. But like we've talked before about maybe making international football something a bit more. Making it a summer event every year instead of having these breaks during the season that really stutter everybody. No one, like there's the odd club team that are happy, like obviously Javi Gracia wasn't, but there's the odd club team that is happy with an international break. They don't have too many players going away from international duty. They can rest and recuperate. They can plan for the coming weeks. They can set their tactical plans in place. They don't have to worry about certain things, and they really love these international breaks. But the majority of teams, it screws you up. It screws up your momentum. You lose players for a few weeks. Your players could get injured. Anything can happen in that time. And it doesn't benefit anyone, and it doesn't benefit the international countries having these big stop-start goals and having a week to kind of get to know your players and play them again, and then losing them for another 3 months. Imagine having the thing at the end of the season, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the end of the season, where you could have your international teams together, galvanise the squad, get the public behind them, play a few matches, have a little bit of good weather football, everyone would be happy with that. And the clubs don't care; they're probably in favour of it because at the end of the season they're on holidays anyway, and they could be for sale for all the players knows. So they don't care; they don't have any skin in the game at that regard. And I think it would benefit the whole game if that happened. But as it is, we're just kind of get these lumbering poor performances from poor teams and underperformances really given the players that are playing for a lot of these sides. But then again, Harry Kane scored a hat-trick, so...
Yeah, it is disruptive to the fan experience as well because, you're watching Premier League or whatever, European League or whatever, and, you're getting in the rhythm of things, the season's just starting, you're starting to really enjoy, that part of the weekend again, and then all of a sudden it's ripped away from you. It's like Ireland played on a Thursday, and there wasn't really anything to watch on Saturday. I had to actually do something for the weekend, as opposed to just being able to rely on sport, and it's going to happen again in 4 weeks, when we get back round, and I'm going to check the fixtures and be like, oh no, there's nothing next weekend.
Yeah, and it's even worse now with the Euro, in the Euro years now, in the Euro qualifying campaign, because of how things don't matter anymore.
It doesn't mean as much. Yeah. When you're qualifying for a World Cup, it's different. Ireland have been to the last 2 Euros now, after a long break out of them, in fairness. But qualifying for Euro 2020, it'd be nice. I'd enjoy it. There'd be a few matches in Dublin or whatever. That'd be nice. But qualifying for Russia, it meant something, and then obviously it got taken away from us in a pretty cruel fashion by the Danes, by Christian Eriksen. So losing that 5-1 is more traumatic than anything I think we could experience in this Euro qualifying, even if we do stumble and mess it up in the end.
Yeah, but we have relative recent success to fall back on, and something to point to as progress, where other teams, the likes of Scotland, say don't. So we have that to fall back on, but I don't know if that's good enough reason to rest on our laurels with this. There's been a lot of talking last week about teams like Ireland, not just Ireland, but teams like Ireland using international football to kind of develop football in a way that it can't otherwise develop in those nations. The likes of many Eastern European countries who now don't have Champions League places. Scotland, as I said, Ireland, who don't really have Champions League places. Teams like Cyprus, who have middling, the odd good player who play in a top league somewhere in Europe, but for the most part have limited Champions League experience, don't get much global exposure for themselves or for the way they play football. And international football can be a great opportunity for them to push on in their own careers and also to develop the game in your own country, because, as I said, there is a confluence of talent now in the big leagues in Europe, and those big teams have already basically qualified for all these tournaments every time, with the exception of maybe Italy in the last World Cup missing out. Usually these big nations qualify, but all there's nothing for the youngsters in those countries to point to towards domestic success. There's no Red Star Belgrade, or there's no doing fantastically well in Europe anymore. There's no Eastern European teams showing up and doing stuff. There isn't even the likes of Apoel Nicosia or anyone like that from Cyprus doing things in the Champions League. You get the odd freak show where someone will even get to a group stage now, but you don't see very much. So maybe international football is a way to kind of, not that you need to drum up popularity, but really, get people into the game domestically, get people attached to it, get people localised. They talk about Real Madrid and Barcelona. I know we're going to talk about them later on, but they're the best supported clubs in the world, and Manchester United, and there's a few more in there: Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Paris Saint-Germain now growing up those rankings, Bayern Munich, Juventus, these big global brands, and there's fans all over the world of these teams. But as a result of that, people are losing touch with their own domestic game, and international football is the last strand that's connecting them to the domestic game. And I think something has to happen to try and boost everything up and really kind of reconnect the fans with the football.
Yeah, international football has kind of just been in that weird limbo, I think, ever since, even just when Greece, I think, won the Euros in 2004, where everyone kind of realised, the standard isn't actually all that great when, club football has all this money poured into it now. You're able to build the best teams in the world as opposed to relying on, the luck of nationality and your own development capabilities to build the best team in the world. Because you think back to, say, the 60s and the 70s, the World Cup was the be-all and end-all of football. And now, obviously, players grow up and they obviously want to win the World Cup, but it isn't the pinnacle of the best teams we see. Spain are kind of last bastion back in 2010 of, this is one of the great footballing sides. But then even beside that, you compare to the Barcelona of the same era, it's like, well, they were just kind of a worse Barcelona without Messi.
Yeah, they're Barcelona without Messi. It's not as
So
good.
like that was really the first time where international football kind of became the little brother to club football.
Yeah. Like you said, it's been a long time since the likes of France would take 6 weeks before a tournament to prepare. Like you hear a couple of weeks now. Even Republic of Ireland went out to Japan, South Korea in 2002. The whole Saipan disaster they were several weeks before, 4 weeks before the World Cup was due to start. I think they were out there. I'm pretty sure the league campaigns in most domestic leagues in Europe aren't over 4 weeks before the beginning of World Cup or a Euro Championship now. They're just still going. Club football absolutely takes precedent over international football. There is no more kind of, special treatment for international teams, especially in the years of tournaments. It's club football or nothing.
Yeah, and it is weird that like we kind of just are remaining in this limbo of like nothing's really being done about it at the top level. Like we're kind of relying on individual countries to kind of step in and be like, oh well, let's develop football in this country a little bit more. But we're not seeing any development in the kind of calendar of football. Like the Nations League came in, but that just got rid of friendlies and didn't really change too much about the structure of the game.
Which no one's really pleased with. Like no one wants the structure that's in place at the moment. It benefits nobody. Club football hates it. Fans hate it. International teams doesn't work for them. I don't think it works for TV companies. Even though this is UEFA's grand plan to increase revenue to national associations, I don't think it's really got that much better above inflation or below what it would have been anyway. Like I think the plan to kind of boost international football popularity has kind of withered in the last couple of years.
And then earlier you mentioned Javi Gracia, his reign as Watford manager has come to an end during the international break. Interestingly enough, it was announced during the England-Bulgaria match.
Yeah, it's a Gus Poyet about it when Gus Poyet got sacked live on air and when he was doing he was doing halftime coverage. I know Javi Garcia wasn't doing it, but it was like that. They were trying to bury the bad news in which
didn't Real Madrid do that with or was it Spain did that with some other match they announced someone left. It happened again recently.
I think it was Luis Enrique when he left. But there were circumstances surrounding that.
That was a different scenario.
There is bereavement involved in that. But yeah, there's. Yeah, it's a weird timing thing. I was on to you before the show started about this and how Frank de Boer was sacked in a very similar way.
One of the great injustices of the Premier League.
Well, we don't know. It could have been the right decision. They stayed up in the end, so it proved to be.
The XG stats alone.
Yeah, but I don't think if you were to average out the way, the XG and stuff like that, it probably would have stayed up. You don't know. It's early in the season.
Screwed by Christian Benteke.
It was a panic decision. Watford. It's strange for them because they don't make panic decisions, but they seem to make the same decision over and over again.
This does seem a little panicky though, because in a similar vein to the way that Frank de Boer was sacked, it does feel that way because the underlying stats suggest that they're underperforming and not overperforming, performing at their level.
But they're not doing terribly.
They are bottom of the league at the moment, but it is such a sample size of 4 matches as well. And Quique Sanchez Flores, the guy who comes in, that's a literal step backwards. He was the manager 2 managers.
He's a good manager. I don't Javi Garcia was decent. He obviously got to an FA Cup final. He is pretty good. I don't know what the ambitions of the Monchi family, isn't it?
The Pozzo family.
Pozzo family, sorry, Monchi's Sevilla, the Pozzo family. I don't know what the ambitions are with Southampton. Like when they originally took over, or why do I keep saying Southampton? With Watford, when they originally took over, they're in the Championship. They had, was it Sean Dyche was in charge at the time?
No, Sean Dyche was part of the Pozzo family, I think.
Oh, was he? He came in. Yeah. Whoever was in charge at the time, they sacked.
They brought in Zola.
They brought in Zola. Sean Dyche was there later on. They've switched around managers a few times.
They've gone through more managers than years I think they've been at Watford.
Yeah, when they got promoted initially, and they switched their manager right before the playoffs.
Yeah, and then they sacked. It was Slavica Jokanovic came in for the playoffs, and then they got rid of Jokanovic to bring in Sanchez Flores after they won. And then Sanchez Flores lasted the full first season, and then they brought in Walter Mazzarri. Yeah. He lasted a full season. Then they brought in Marco Silva, who lasted 4 months or whatever it was. Yeah. And then Gracia's been in ever since. He's the longest stint I think they've had.
Yeah, and he's done well. And none of these managers did badly. Like Walter Mazzarri, you can say stuff about, but like Quique Sanchez Flores, he said himself that he'd stopped getting through to the players, and I think that was a mutual decision for him to depart at the time. And him coming back does feel a bit weird, although he hasn't, like, I know he does punditry and stuff like that in Spain, and he does...
He was working in Spain while after he left Watford, but I can't remember what club he was at.
Yeah, and he has won the Europa League and stuff, so he does have previous being a good manager.
CV,
yeah, he's a decent manager, and it would be a good get in isolation for Watford again. But yeah, it's a bizarre decision because they're not doing that badly. They haven't. It's not like they've broken the bank or Javi Gracia has like tanked the club or anything like that. I don't like. They haven't had the easiest start for them. Ideally, like Watford do better against teams that are better than them. That's the way things are going.
And it's a difficult start for Sanchez Flores as well because their first game is at home to Arsenal, who I think it was Gracia got.
Well, traditionally, Watford do manage to beat Arsenal. It's like
once a season,
yeah.
But then after that, they play City, who just routinely dismantle that side, including the FA Cup final last May.
Yeah, I foresee them losing the next couple of games at least. Like, I don't know why they don't. If they're expecting a bounce, I don't see them getting it. Maybe they should have waited another couple of weeks to sack
to the next international break.
Yeah, maybe that would have been the more clever move. But
the thing is, this didn't actually initially surprise me. Like going into the international break, I think I maybe even said it last week. I can't remember, but I thought, oh, he'll be gone next week. But then it didn't happen during the week, so I thought, oh, maybe he just survived for another few weeks. But then they just announced it on Saturday of all days. Sanchez Flores still hadn't even met the players at that point, although there are still a few from still in the side, I think, from when he was first there, like Troy Deeney, obviously.
Will Hughes is still there? Was he there at the time, or is he still at Derby?
I think he was there.
There is a few knocking.
Well.
There's a few knocking around, and there's a few elder hands, and Watford do have a lot going for them. Like they're well backed by that family, by the Pozzo, God, family, and they have some decent players. As they got to the FA Cup final. They are. I don't know what the ambition is because they're not going to finish. They haven't had the investment worthy of a team finishing above 10th, 11th. At best, someone goes wrong ahead of them 9th.
Yeah, they came. I think it was 9th. They came in
somewhere
last year.
along those. Yeah, and that's as best as they could ever hope for. So I don't know. Like in the current Premier League, I don't see a Leicester happening in the Watford, type of situation. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
And the thing is as well, like while I think I tipped them from relegation, and I do think they haven't played very well in the first 4 games, like it's still 34 games for Gracia himself to salvage things, and like it wouldn't have surprised me if he had managed to turn it around. Yeah, because like they got a bit unfortunate against West Ham, where it was still 1-1 and they missed an absolute sitter. Yeah, I think it was Will Hughes actually that missed it, and then West Ham went up the other end of the pitch a couple of minutes later, scored, and they went on to win the match 3-1 in the end. I think it was. And like if that goal goes in, they win 2-1. Yeah, maybe they go higher up they probably overtake West Ham in the table. They're out of the relegation zone. They've got points on the board. Like it's the small margins, and it feels harsh that he's been sacked this quickly over such fine margins.
It truly is, and I just find it. The other last surprising thing about this whole situation is when De Boer, going back to that, when he got sacked for Crystal Palace, there was a huge outcry. You can't do this. The football is mad. Football is crazy. Not a peep this time. Silence. Everyone's just accepted it, and it's like, have we? It's not a like, oh, football's gone mad or football's terrible, but it's just it is a sign of the times that we are now. De Boer desensitized us to managers getting sacked after 4 matches of a season.
I do think they are slightly different in the sense that De Boer was immediately replaced by Roy Hodgson as well, who is like, that's a total opposite. And Crystal Palace have built up De Boer as this new era Crystal Palace, and then they just completely threw it away.
There is definitely more joined together thinking at Watford. There always has been. They never.
They're a well-run club.
Yeah, the family, the Pozzo family, they've run clubs for decades now. If you combine them together across Europe, they know what they're doing.
And like Udinese as well, like they've always been solidly run. Yeah. And all the other clubs they run, like you're not
Real
wrong.
Mallorca, is it? They own them.
I can't remember what their Spanish club is. And then just finally in the news, Michael Owen and Alan Shearer have gone public in their hatred for each other. What great international strike partnership will go public next?
Well, and didn't Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham, and they hate each other as well, didn't they?
A good history of the English partnership. Who was Wayne Rooney up with there?
That he hated Ruud van Nistelrooy. He didn't get on. Nobody got on with Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Yeah, but in the England squad, I was thinking of
Michael Owen.
You just go with Michael Owen as well.
Yeah. Like, Michael Owen's releasing a book soon. I'm sure that's something to do with all this.
Oh, it is 100% everything to do with it. Because I think initially the quotes came out from Michael Owen's autobiography. Yeah. That led to Alan Shearer bringing it up.
I still don't understand what's this stuff. It's as they say, banter. It's not even banter, really. It's just someone airing dirty laundry. And it's not even that dirty. It's just,
It was the definition.
Don't particularly like this person.
It was just the definition of a slow news week. I think he timed it well. So I think if it had been the week before or the week after, maybe it would have been drowned out a little by just football in general. Because like Michael Owen on commentary has been a bit of a joke ever since he's done it, or on punditry in general.
Yeah.
Like saying stuff like, "Oh, he took a good penalty there. He'll be disappointed he missed it," and stuff like that. And like just talking about nothing. Everyone makes fun of the fact that he's not watched any movies. He just seems like a dull
he doesn't really
person.
like football. That's what I've learned about Michael Owen from his punditry. He's not a huge fan of the game, and why. Eventually he will be replaced, I'd imagine, as a pundit on these programs.
Last week in Monaco, the Champions League group stage draw took place. While the draw itself hasn't left many wondering what 16 teams will progress to the second round, it does make for a good launchpad for discussion as to European football as a whole. Last season, all of the traditional top 5 league titles, i.e. Spain, England, Italy, Germany and France, all saw their champions retain the crown. Last season also saw initial plans for a new Champions League format be put forward, involving promotion and relegation. These two things leave us wondering, what is the future of European football?
Well, I hope, as I said at the time, I really do hope that Champions League football isn't knocked off into that promotion relegation thing. I think that's terrible.
Yeah, it does sound like in most recent talks that the plan for promotion relegation has been muted by most clubs. I think it's mostly just Agnelli at Juventus that is pushing it.
Yeah, because he needs to kind of boost Juventus's global profile, and clearly winning multiple Serie A titles back to back doesn't seem to do it for them.
And losing multiple Champions League finals back to back.
And changing their kit to look less like referees so they're more marketable in America.
Yeah, because it does sound like the British clubs were not a big fan of it. I can't imagine that they will be too bothered about the structural changes to the Champions League, because it isn't as much of a moneymaker as the Premier League itself is.
Yeah, but I think the Premier League acknowledge, and most teams would know, they know that what goes up can come down. There's been since the demise of the Manchester United juggernaut, there's been no ever-present, team in those top tournaments of like the Champions League since it became the Champions League in the early 90s. Manchester United were that team, and now that they're not there, they know they can easily fall out of favour. They can have a couple of years where they don't qualify for the Champions League. And all of them know that, so they're realistic about their prospects. Like, they can know something can change and they can fall out, and they don't want to be completely relegated. They don't want to be absent or trapped in a deserted island away from Champions League football for multiple years. It wouldn't suit them financially. It wouldn't suit them as clubs, and it doesn't really make much sense in competition wise, because I'm in favour of open seeding and removing these kind of exclusivity things that are in the Champions League, and I know you're not really necessarily for that, but I think it would be better in the long run to have these kind of open, to continue what we at least at what we have at the moment as an open structure of football.
Yeah, and like there's stuff as well in recent years where the top 4 of the big 4 leagues being guaranteed a Champions League place based on their previous result or previous league result is just kind of we're getting bigger teams in it. Like, we're getting Inter Milan back in the Champions League now.
Yeah. But the Italian teams don't we're getting these teams in there, but they're not performing.
Exactly, and it just leaves teams not Red Star Belgrade, because they actually have come back into it. Yeah. But teams from that area of
Sparta Prague are in there this season, but they've suffered the last few seasons of not being able to get
standard, in. That standard that you would see from Red Star Belgrade, that's affecting it all across Europe.
Yeah.
Celtic are struggling to get to the Champions League. Yep. Ajax are going through rounds of qualifying, and PSV aren't necessarily getting in there alongside.
Yeah.
Ajax and
Belgian teams suffer as these
I can't remember
smaller.
the last time Anderlecht was in the Champions League.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years at least. Anyway,
I think they were in there with Celtic one year, but other than that, it's barren.
There was another Belgian team in there last season. I remember. I think didn't they play Man City?
Genk.
Was it? I think it was. They were in Man City's group last year, but like a Belgian team is getting through, but it is just like singular now. When previously we could have had like Feyenoord, PSV, and Ajax in Champions League, you would have had Celtic in the Champions League or Rangers
or both even.
Yeah, like in theory, you would have more, and it spreads the wealth of football then, and then team players aren't so concentrated getting out of these leagues. As to go back on the earlier point about promoting football in these smaller countries, and it's not affecting it negatively now as much, but in years to come, in decades to come, it will absolutely negatively impact football in those countries because they're not seeing the highest level, they're not getting the opportunity of seeing football at its highest level, they're not having a reason to switch on, to tune in, to support their local football, to get involved in local football, and it just ends up, just damaging football domestically in those countries. Like, far be it for Ireland, like we're nowhere near getting near a Champions League place. We're barely near getting a Europa League place.
I don't think Dundalk qualified for Europa League this year. I can't even remember. They
played a qualifier. No, I don't think so.
I think they lost I know they lost to Carabao at one point, but I think that was Champions League qualifying.
Yeah.
But then one of the actually more interesting ideas I've seen put forward for the kind of innovation of European football would be the idea of merging the Belgian and Dutch leagues into one system, which would be quite interesting because obviously, we dislike the idea of a Super League, but I think this would be different in the sense that it would help raise the standard of competition in those two countries.
Yeah.
Because one thing that has really held back Ajax in terms of European competition, and PSV and Feyenoord as well, is the fact that it is just those three that are qualifying for Europe. They don't have a fourth or a fifth or a sixth team to come in and help boost the coefficient points that they would have every season in the way that you would see in Spain and England and France and all those other countries. So the idea of kind of putting together those two leagues or those two systems would be quite interesting, and there's possibilities for other countries to do the same. Like, I know there's been a lot of talk over the years of Celtic and Rangers joining the English pyramid and stuff like that.
But that's never materialised.
And we have Swansea and Cardiff in there.
Yeah, the Welsh teams are in there, but Wales is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, it is
Scotland.
slightly different as well. Like, it would be interesting to see if that idea came to pass, or if we saw more ideas put forward.
It's unfortunate, but you're probably, like, I'm sure people in Belgium and Netherlands, loyal supporters of their leagues, of the Eredivisie and whatever, I forget what the Belgian Super League is called.
Juliper?
Yeah, it's something like that, Juniper League or whatever.
Pro League or something.
Yeah, I'm sure they would hate the idea of their league getting kind of, I don't know what castrated and turned into some weird proxy league of the two nations, but unfortunately that's the reality we live in, that we have to try and find these solutions for smaller nations to compete with the larger leagues. Like, I'm pretty sure a league of Belgium, Netherlands will probably challenge France as one of the big leagues.
Yeah, and it would certainly be entertaining because we'd have the title contenders in two countries coming together essentially to create what would be a top 6 or a top 7, and then the standard of mid-table teams would be better because you're getting a few, like, you're kind of getting rid of the dead weight that is there in the Eredivisie.
Yeah.
Not to knock on those two leagues, but it feels like those leagues are a bit bloated with weak competition.
Yeah,
there's not really much to be done.
Yeah,
about
there's
that.
some lightweight competition in there, and there's a few which, to the Dutch and the Belgian credit, that's almost, both of those leagues are often proving grounds for a lot of young talent, especially from South America, that come over. And, they get a chance to play football. And that is why the Dutch and Belgian national teams traditionally have pretty good youth players coming through. And they often have good representation in international Champions League level teams around the world, or around Europe at least. But yeah, unfortunately, that is a solution. Like, there's some talk of it happening in the Czech Republic and other countries in the Eastern Bloc, maybe reforming other leagues, older leagues that once existed, to try and boost the standard and hopefully improve their coefficient results as well, to try and get more Champions League places. But that's more for financial survival, I think, more than anything else, in the likes of Romania and countries in that area as well. I think these leagues have enough to survive on their own, but I don't see another way forward for them in the longer run, especially if a European Super League ever does materialise. Unfortunately, the likes of those Eastern European leagues, maybe Belgium, Netherlands, and Scotland, and those, formerly teams that would provide Champions League winners, like in not
European Cup winners.
European Cup winners, most definitely. And, teams who compete in Europe, like Rangers have got to Europa League finals, Celtic have got to Europa League finals in the last 20 years. So, they're decent teams. They're not to be laughed at, really. But, that's their way to compete with the European Super League, is form their own mini Super Leagues.
Yeah, like it'd almost be like make a European pyramid almost.
Yeah, it'd be kind of like American sport with major leagues and minor leagues and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then just to bring back to the other facet of this conversation of the top 5 leagues being all retained last year between Man City, PSG, Bayern Munich, Barcelona and Juventus. Yeah. And going into this season, like we're a couple of games now into each of those leagues, and Barcelona probably looked the most likely so far to not retain, but like PSG had a bit of a slow start, but you just imagine that they will in the long run. You imagine that Man City and Liverpool, that title race will go close, but you'd back Man City to win it. Yeah. Bayern Munich, Dortmund could be interesting, but like Dortmund lost to Union Berlin, which I suppose is a good story in itself for Union Berlin and all that, but that's a disappointing defeat for Dortmund. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like the kind of match Bayern will lose this year. Yeah. Then like Inter Milan are kind of better than they have been now that Conte got in, but like even with Sarri coming in and probably knocking 10 points off what Allegri would probably get, you'd still back Juve to win.
Yeah, you can't, like, Ancelotti is a good manager, no doubt. Like, he's won Champions League multiple times, he's won league titles wherever most places he's gone. So he has had a season to bed in as well. So you can hope for something like that from Ancelotti at Napoli and, as you say, Conte at Inter. Like, Juventus was the main league I would focus on. This is potentially a league title that could change hands this season. But like having the season started and Napoli losing already to Juventus.
Yeah, that was such a cruel game.
But it's points. Like, I know Juventus probably won't maintain the pace they were at in previous years, but any points dropped against Juventus, like that's a 6-point turnaround. Like,
especially the sequence of events that happened in that match, because Juve went 3-0 up, then Napoli brought it back to 3-0, and then Koulibaly with such a fluky kind of own goal, last kick of the game.
That's psychologically damaging, especially when it's Napoli against Juventus.
Yeah.
Especially
with Sarri not quite there because he's sick, and we hope he does well there, getting over pneumonia. But like with Sarri as manager, Higuain scoring for Juve as well.
Yeah, it adds huge. Yeah, it adds huge weight to the whole affair. And you say Inter there, but Inter I don't trust. Like, they've got rid of their best player, who I know it's probably better for the team unity in the long run. Icardi, we talked about a lot last season about how he was just kind of the whole Wanda. Is it Wanda the wife?
Yeah, Wanda Nara. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole situation around her as his agent manager. And causing havoc wherever, every week, and him getting into arguments with the ultras.
PSG is the perfect spot for.
Yeah, like I won't even go. We'll come to PSG in a second, but like Inter, they've signed players to replace him. Like Lukaku seems to have hit the ground running, and then he gets racially abused, and then the fans attack Lukaku for getting racially abused. Like,
yeah, like that's such a bizarre situation.
Like, I don't know how long. Like Lukaku, I don't want to say poor Lukaku because he's a well-paid, he's a millionaire, multi-millionaire.
But that's not
footballer.
That's not a
no, but
it's not a like.
I'm not saying nothing about racist abuse, but I mean,
if
I finish my point, that he's only just left a club that didn't really want him after leaving Everton, who did want him, after leaving Chelsea, who didn't really want him, and now he's at Inter, who it looks like the writing's on the wall already that he'll probably have to go at the end of the season again and move to Spain maybe this time, and maybe he won't be abused or hated in some form or another. Like, I feel bad for him in that respect, because he hit the ground running, he did well, after he answered his critics really after leaving. He
scored in his first 2 games.
Yeah, and did well in those games as well. It wasn't just his goals that were, his contribution to the team was good as well, which is something that's often overlooked about Lukaku. I know there was a bit of that a couple of seasons ago when he first joined United, that he did a lot of good work on the right hand side, and he did it again for Inter. But it's just that team with those fans, with the way with Conte, it seems like all the elements are there to be a great team. I know they're leaving the San Siro in the next few years. It would be a great way to go out, to build something, to do great for Inter again. But they just seem to screw everything up.
Yeah, that is kind of almost written into the history of Inter Milan at this point, with Jose Mourinho and Hector Herrera. Is that his name, Hector Herrera?
Yeah, it was something.
Helenio Herrera. Rather,
yeah.
Thinking of the Portuguese fella at Porto. But those two managers are kind of the the kind of exception that kind of proves the rule almost. Like we saw last year in the Champions League with the Spalletti, where they had the group in their hands and then they just drew PSV and already knocked out PSV and handed Tottenham away back in.
But I watched multiple Inter matches last season, especially when they played good teams. I don't want to say superior teams, but like, good teams in Serie A, or if they're playing, they're likes of PSV or Tottenham or anything like that, and they battered them in terms of football. They created chances, they controlled the game. They're like they looked to cut above, and they conceded goals, and they couldn't respond, and they looked naive.
And even in Spalletti's final few games there, where they looked like they were certs to get top four, and then they nearly threw it away on the final game and allowed Milan back into it for about 20 minutes there, and then they managed to turn around against a relegation threat in Empoli. Yeah, like it just seems like it's written into the history of that club. And then I suppose it is good that the Derby d'Italia will be one of the bigger games this season. Like in the last few years, it's been kind of a bit muted, just because really the whole story going to it is just, can Inter slow down Juve's challenge against someone else, or can they get slight bragging rights? It doesn't have that history that it did in the 90s even, where these were the two biggest teams in Italy going against each other, fighting for the title. It is good to see a return to that. But Italy, Juve are on the longest streak of those
6 league titles,
or Bayern?
No, I think it's I think it's Juventus.
Yeah, or maybe it's the same amount actually, because they both win it in 2012.
Probably, yeah. They're either way, they've won it a lot.
It is depressing either way. And like then last year we talked about a team that just kind of throws it away and doesn't take advantage of the situation when it's there in front of them. Borussia Dortmund last year, just they had it all, and then just even in the match against Bayern Munich, they lost 5-0, and like it just was so depressing to watch, really, for them. Like not like I've got no skin in the game there.
They choked. Like Lucien Favre, he has a habit of doing this. They don't cope psychologically when it comes to it, when the crunch happens. They're not a clutch team. They haven't been for several years. And despite being probably the weakest Bayern Munich team in several years, of them clearly going through some kind of weird change, or I hate to say, but transition, Niko Kovac not playing the way he wanted to play, and not playing the way Bayern Munich hierarchy wanted him to play, and getting in players, getting out players, and the same thing kind of continuing on into this season. Like Niko Kovac probably would have been sacked if he didn't win the league last year. He's somehow still there because of the lack of maybe alternative options that are available at the moment. I'd say he'll be gone at the end of this season, and someone else will be in at that point. Maybe it's Allegri, maybe it's somebody else. But I don't see Dortmund really. They've signed well. They've kept hold of players I thought they might lose, the likes of Jadon Sancho, who's hit the ground running this season again.
Signed a new contract again, wage increase.
And a few other players that are there as well. And they still have maintained some of their great players like Marco Reus, and Mario Götze is making a slow and steady comeback. They brought back
Hummels, Mats Hummels.
Exactly.
Well. And that's kind of where the other interesting point that I wanted to bring in here as well is, like, before the transfer window opened, I remember talking about it on the show, like, we're building up to this big grand summer where all the big clubs are kind of in that transitional period where they need to buy new players, and Real Madrid kind of did that, but that even paled in comparison to what Atletico were doing across the other side of the city. Bayern, they brought in Coutinho on loan. They brought in Ivan Perisic. They didn't really bring in the players that was expected for them.
They got who was available. They got who they could.
It felt like they kind of did a kind of half-assed version of what they should have done, in a way that maybe Manchester United have done in the past and other English clubs. But it's weird to see the teams that we like. Normally, we associate Bayern and Real Madrid with this ruthless nature of, we're going to go into the market, we're going to get who we want, no matter what the other team says, and we're going to get it for the price we want, and we're going to play the best football with the best players and all this, and we're going to buy our way to a title essentially. And like, it just, like, with Real Madrid and PSG as well, it's disappointing to see them completely abandon the youth players that they had coming through the ranks there as well, because PSG offloaded several. Real Madrid, like Dani Ceballos, even not necessarily a youth player, but a young Spanish player coming through. They've got Reguilon went out on loan. Several players went out on loan,
and it hasn't helped anything for Real Madrid.
And then there's the whole stuff with Gareth Bale, where it's like, hopefully he's gone tomorrow.
The top scorer.
Yeah, he's already the top scorer in the league now at the moment, and it's just so bizarre to see teams that we once thought of as ruthless in this market now just kind of getting by. Like Real Madrid spent a lot of money on Hazard and Luka Jovic, but it doesn't seem like they were players that necessarily Zidane wanted in or Perez wanted in.
Yeah,
it seems there was power struggle there.
Yeah, and
Like, I don't see Real Madrid challenging for the league in a way that, like, Atletico Madrid already are, in fairness. They've won all their games. They have a 5-point head start over Barcelona.
Yeah.
And Barcelona as well. Like, you'd think after their humiliating exit from the Champions League last year that they'd have done something. Like, they brought in Griezmann, they brought in Frankie de Jong, but they don't seem like they're the holes that needed filling in that club either.
Looking at going back to international football, Frankie de Jong continued where he left off last season for Netherlands. Hasn't managed to do it at all for Barcelona so far. It's a different type of football. He's not integrating that quickly. That doesn't mean he won't in the longer run. I don't know about it. Griezmann, you think the opportunity of Luis Suarez being injured and on the way down in terms of his, contribution to the team in terms of goals and assists in the last years has gone down steadily since he joined, that this is an opportunity for a new player to take over as the main striker, and maybe that is Griezmann. And you don't really know. They're getting it when they played with each other earlier in the season before Suarez got injured. They were getting in the way of each other. They didn't really know what they were doing. They were like both on top of each other, and now Barcelona seem almost lightweight because all they have is Griezmann. I know Messi's coming back now, and Dembele, and they've got rid of Coutinho, which despite him being one less man seems to have freed up a bit of space in midfield somehow. But they don't seem like they know what they're doing, and they don't have a defined style of football. And if you have nothing else, if you have, as we've said many times before, if you don't have excitement in terms of players or in terms of winning or in terms of prospects of getting well in big tournaments, which maybe Barcelona don't have this season, you want to at least see a style of football, a way of playing, something you can get behind, and that is missing and always has been missing from Valverde's Barcelona. I thought it was a certainty last season after he crashed out of the Champions League he would get sacked and someone else would be brought in, but it appears that they don't have that that individual they want to target, and they don't really seem to know what they're doing. I know there's an election in the next year, I think, in Barcelona. Maybe that'll change everything, but there seems to be a lot of inertia at that club since Valverde was appointed. There was even talk this week of Messi maybe leaving when his contract expires, I think the end of this season,
to go back to Argentina. Is it?
Or, well, I don't think he'll go back to Argentina, but he'll go anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
like whoever that would be. I don't see it as being that likely because he seems to be, he's a one club man so far, at least at his professional level. Why would he go somewhere else when he could take on this whole, he already has taken the whole club mantle upon himself. So, but if the fact that there's talk about it and players like Piqué, senior players Piqué, are acknowledging that this is a realistic possibility, it's a bit worrying for Barcelona, and they probably need to change, or not change, but really set themselves up right in the near future. That doesn't mean I still have them as favourites to win the La Liga because they have that strength and depth. Because one primary reason, they have Leo Messi, and if he plays, Barcelona will most likely win, and he generally does play a lot of games.
Yeah, it is interesting that Atletico basically got rid of their whole starting 11 for various reasons. Griezmann release clause was matched, and certain players, just their time at the club,
Godin,
had come to an end. But they spent a lot of money, and they seem to have spent it well.
They always do.
And it's interesting that they're kind of going for a slightly different style. They've kind of morphed that 4-4-2 into a 4-2-3-1. The game is centred around João Felix now. It's not very similar to Griezmann, but he brings that same spark to the team that was there and would have been missing if they hadn't brought in anyone to replace Griezmann. So it is interesting to see Simeone kind of evolve now, because over the last few years, like I've thought over the last 2 or 3 years that this is the year Atletico come back, or no, this is the year. But then like the way they went out to Juve in the Champions League, they didn't really push for La Liga in the end against Barca.
Yeah, against a weak Barcelona.
Yeah, so it is interesting to see that maybe Simeone has seen, okay, this team's gotten stale, my tactics have gotten a little stale, let's go out there and try something a little different. And they went 2-0 down against Eibar last week. It was interesting to see them actually come back and win that 3-2, because I'm not sure they would have done that last year. So
they didn't have the firepower, it's to say, and I still think they're lacking a bit, and they're still, like, as in a proper centre forward, they're still looking for that new centre.
Diego Costa,
he's still there.
He's definitely past his best.
Yeah,
at this point.
Absolutely.
He's still a great contributor to the overall team ethos, but I don't know, is he going to actually contribute with crucial goals? And same with Morata.
Morata, we don't even want to. Morata is basically the new Fernando Torres. He'll come in for a couple of, which is terrible because he's only 24, 25, and he's
not that young, but
he's still young.
Younger, yeah,
he's still pretty young. Yeah, so we will yet to be seen. Like, it's interesting, and it would be as the season started and we've rolled into the first few weeks of the season, it seems Atletico are the most likely to challenge that hegemony, is that the word? Yeah. Of league champions. Like, they seem to be the most likely. Real Madrid, before we go too much into them, they're going nowhere at the moment. I think Zidane has one of the worst records of a manager since coming back to Madrid, including last season. And again, I don't know if that's his doing or just the basket case that is Real Madrid at the moment, and they don't really know what's happening. And Gareth Bale is carrying the team, even though they wanted to get rid of him up until the very last minute.
Question marks still remain over Zidane for me, even though he won three
Champions
Leagues in a row. But I'm still not convinced he's a good manager. Yeah. Like, it's so bizarre.
Well, he is. He's a great manager. It's just that maybe he was a great manager at that moment, and maybe he's not that great manager anymore.
And then there's the whole Neymar equation as well going on between Real Madrid and Barcelona, and then PSG. Like, it sounded like they were willing to sell him.
Well, they got Icardi in, and I think that was their...
Well, the fear there is that Cavani is out of contract at the end of the season, and they realise that, okay, his time at the club is waning. It is time to kind of get rid of him, basically, and he can go off and maybe go back to Napoli, go somewhere else, go back to Uruguay, maybe.
Yeah, maybe at Christmas even get a little bit of money for him.
And then Mbappe, his influence in the side is growing as well. So it'll be interesting to see how
but I think
they play off each other.
I think one of the reasons why Real Madrid didn't attack and go all out for Neymar this summer is because Mbappe will probably be available next summer.
Yeah, and it'd be so bizarre as well to see PSG just completely get torn apart by Real Madrid and Barcelona next season, because it sounds like they kind of want to get rid of Neymar. But that's what happens.
That's what happens when you're not, like, we don't want to talk about football heritage, but that is the case when, like, Luis Suarez is playing for Liverpool Football Club, one of the biggest clubs in the world with the biggest histories in the world. Now, I know he didn't have the same connection to the place as maybe other players would.
And the club wasn't quite
it wasn't at the level it's at right now as Champions League winners. But he wanted away from that club. He wanted to go to Arsenal. He wanted to go to anywhere that would take him away from the place. And unfortunately for PSG, they have the same. They're a great club. It's one of the best cities in the world, Paris, and it's a romantic club. You know, even if it doesn't have a history yet, it will have a history soon, and that is an attraction to a lot of players, to a lot of coaches, to a lot of fans. Get behind a team that hasn't made history yet, that hasn't achieved much yet, and be part of it as it does that. But that only goes so far. And when you have the opportunity as a professional, I can be a part of this now, or I can go to this massive, globally, like one of the most supported clubs in the world, and be the best player at that club, or have an opportunity to prove myself at that level. They'll take it in an absolute instant.
And then their actual competition in France is like Monaco. Obviously, were a great one-off season a couple of years ago, but it feels like it's going to take another one-off season from another great side that eventually gets picked apart.
Like Lille did great last year, but it was more down to like really exceptional coaching and a couple of really of bright sparks of players. And
like they've lost some of those.
They've lost some of their best players.
Gone.
Yeah. Like Marseille are always
thereabouts, but they're always. It seems like they're still in transition with this new owner coming.
Well, I don't know if transition is the right word. I just don't think they'll ever be up. They are, like, if they were in one of the big European leagues, the other big European leagues, they would be skirting Europa League places. They'd never really be pushing any further than that.
Then, like, Nice were bought by Jim Ratcliffe, the richest man in Britain. It seems like he's kind of betting in there. It doesn't seem like he's planning on investing hugely anytime soon. Like, they have a decent side. Patrick Vieira in charge. So an interesting kind of side plot to that team. Yeah. And then Lyon as well. Like, they're a well-run club. They obviously were very successful about 10 years ago, before PSG came in and decided they wanted to run the place. Or rather, Qatar decided they wanted to run the place. But again, like, they have an exceptional side. They did quite well in Europe last year. Like, they beat Man City. They were very impressive. They were close to putting up a fight against Barcelona before Messi
they've lost
stepped
some of their
in.
Best players again.
Yeah, Nabil Fekir kind of left randomly for a cheap enough price to Real Betis, which is kind of one of the weirder signings.
Yeah, there's always been talk about Fekir and his knees.
Yeah,
and stuff
ever since
that
Liverpool move collapsed, there's been worries about him, but he was still doing very well for Lyon. Like, they've got Memphis Depay in there. He was continuously kind of just a B plus kind of player. Yeah. Like, he does well with Lyon, but I couldn't see him going back to a Manchester United caliber club and doing well there.
Well, at this point, Man United would very...
Yeah, maybe he could go back to Man United specifically and do well.
Yeah,
but not a Man United caliber. Or even just a Champions League level club, I should say.
Well, I think Memphis Depay is pretty good, and he has shown himself in the Netherlands and at Lyon that he is an exceptional player. Just maybe... he thrives better when he is a big fish in a small pond
Yeah.
than just another fish in a larger pond. And I think that helps his mentality and the way he plays the game. When he has more responsibility on his shoulders, I think he actually does better than when he's just meant to be a bit part player in a greater collective.
And like they lost in Dombele as well. He was
Yeah.
kind of central to their
Yeah, so
midfield.
like I would say Lyon will be lucky to finish third this season in France.
Yeah.
Like I think second is up for grabs between anyone. It's a matter of like Lille last season, getting a good run in the middle of the season together. But PSG have this sewn up without even doing much.
Fancies his chances. Oh, brilliant goal! A brilliant goal! Remember the name, Wayne Rooney.
The Premier League is back this week, and we've missed it so over the last
It's been
2
rough.
period. It's one of the few weeks this season where there is no big game between any of the two top six.
Silly Sky.
Maybe it's for the best though that we kind of ease ourselves back into it.
Yeah.
It's actually because the Champions League is back the following Tuesday and Wednesday. Then we do have a few teams playing at 3:00 that we might not have seen previously. But we've got Liverpool Newcastle at 12:30. That's a storied history of a fixture list.
Yeah, the greatest game in the Premier League history.
The-
Kevin Keegan against Roy Evans.
Yeah, the 4-3 Stan
Anfield,
Collymore.
I don't foresee it maybe being that kind of a
No,
game. this
let's not
time.
build up.
Maybe closer to the Luis Suarez era 4 or 5-0s.
Yeah.
I can see those happening again. Liverpool, a lot of their players kind of didn't have much, like they were on international duty, but didn't have to do a great deal on international duty, if you know what I mean. So most of them would have quite a nice week of resting and stuff like that to get themselves going for this match against Newcastle. And Newcastle, Steve Bruce has had 2 more weeks to bed in his tactics and his pre-match training regimes, his warm-ups and everything like that. They had a good result against Spurs. They had an okay result the week after against whatchamacallit last week. They got the draw.
Yeah, I remember, but I can't remember.
Norwich?
They played. No, they lost to Norwich.
They lost to Norwich. Whoever it wasn't Watford, because was it someone in yellow, Southampton?
I can't remember.
We can't remember at all.
The result against Spurs is the big one.
Yeah, and then they got a draw afterwards, so they're unbeaten in 2 matches. So that's something to look forward to for them. But I think this Liverpool side will ease themselves into a Champions League group the following midweek by putting a few goals past them and maybe giving a chance to a couple of the players who haven't had too many opportunities so far this season.
Then in the 3:00 kickoff, we've actually got some pretty interesting matches. Pity they won't be televised anywhere. Man United play Leicester, which seems like a real banana skin kind of game for Man United.
Well, the way Manchester United's season is going, as I said to you before the international break happened, I think the international break would be a bit of a saviour for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But if Leicester pulls something out of this, and Brendan Rodgers does love beating Manchester United when he has the opportunity to, he is a former Liverpool manager. He knows
he's won at Old Trafford as a manager.
He has, and he would love and this would propel Leicester to a I think clearly being the best of the rest in terms of this season and it going forward. I think Everton, while having an okay start and spending a lot of money, I don't think they have the structure or team or kind of management in place that Leicester do. I think Leicester have a very strong spine, good defenders, good goalkeeper. Jamie Vardy doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon. Maddison's a strong player. I think Brendan Rodgers and the team around him, the sporting directors and the coaches, have signed good players this summer. He's bringing in youth. He's still trying to get the best out of the likes of Iheanacho and a few of the other younger players in that team. They've held on to players as well that they thought they would lose last summer. The only real departure was Harry Maguire. They know Harry Maguire as well. They probably know how, if there's one player in the Premier League that knows how to get at Harry Maguire, it's probably Jamie Vardy.
Yeah.
So it's all lining up to be a good opportunity for Leicester to do it. And as I said before, a lot of their players have had the last 2 weeks off, so they'll be raring to go against this kind of weird Manchester United team who haven't got out of the blocks at all this season.
They're kind of flat ever since that Chelsea win.
Is Pogba back fit? I know he missed international duty.
I get the feeling that was one of those I'm skipping international duty kind of injuries as opposed to an actual injury.
But
same with Aaron Wan-Bissaka.
Yeah, but there are two players I think they have cover for in some regard, that they have players who could step into those roles and not wreck United's chance of getting a result in this game. But the positions that still worry me are centre half around Harry Maguire, not necessarily Harry Maguire, but whoever he's going to be playing with, and up front that you lose one of your players, or your Marcus Rashford or your Anthony Martials have a bad day, and you're not getting anything out of the match. And that is my big concern for that match from Manchester United point of view. You'd have them, I'd say a draw is probably the favourite at the moment, because it's at Old Trafford. You can't really bet against Manchester United at Old Trafford, despite them already losing there this season. But it's veering very close to Leicester being the favourites of victory in that match, which is very unusual when you think about it. Early in the season at Old Trafford, Manchester United against Leicester City, and you're thinking rationally that Leicester City have a very good chance of victory.
Tottenham against Crystal Palace, London derby there, also 3 o'clock.
I can't see beyond Tottenham at this point. They need to get a result.
It is the kind of match for Palace. Like, they did it to Manchester United. They've done it last season where
they beat Arsenal last season.
They're one match in the league that suits them is being away against one of the top sides. So it could be a tricky afternoon for Spurs, but it could just be one of those matches where Spurs just win it by virtue of having the quality in the side to get through.
Their squad is lightweight, I think, in terms of the number of players they have. They have a Champions League match a few days later. They will need to split. They'll need to actually rest players or actually have a bit of a strategy for conditioning. So, because it is early in the season, as I said, Harry Kane scored a hat-trick for England. He did play. Their English-based players have played. Most of their international players actually have played over the break, which isn't the best preparation for this. When you're kind of looking, why are you playing in nonsense matches when you could be resting and recuperating and getting your early season fitness back, in line, because that's something that was noticeable against Arsenal, is that they were out in their, with the exception of a few players, they were like out on their feet. Like Javi Sanchez was just completely wrecked by the 75th minute in the Arsenal match, and is he going to deputise it right back again? That is something against Zaha. It's not a good person to be up against when you can't actually play right back. So there is opportunity for Crystal Palace, but I think Pochettino has set his stall out. He's not leaving, at least in this period of the season. Whether he decides to go later on in time when a Real Madrid job maybe becomes available, that might be a different story. But his window is closed. Transfer window is now closed, which he said is the beginning of the season for him. He's got his team at least until Christmas. He can work with them. He can psychologically work with his team and get them up for the match. And he did it last season. He pulled out results when they didn't play well, when they shouldn't have got results. I think they have to focus on this and get a result in the league to try and set themselves up for a good season, because otherwise you're looking at them already being in that kind of embroiled in that top 6 race, when they really, in the last few seasons, they've been up there in third, challenging second, first. I don't see that happening this season, but they maybe don't want to throw in the towel this early.
Wolves against Frank Lampard's Chelsea as well could prove for an interesting tie.
Similar to the Manchester United match, United have started poorly this season, haven't really got out of the blocks. Chelsea are something similar, like is it Abraham or
Abraham?
It's definitely Abraham, because Abraham.
I've only ever heard Tammy Abraham.
Yeah, it's the commentator match today screwed me up, but he's finally started scoring, and he scored pretty good goals now against Sheffield United in the last match,
and Norwich the week before.
He's actually getting, these aren't opportunistic set pieces. These are goals he's taking well. He's commanding the box. I don't even think he was doing this well at Aston Villa in terms of his overall physical presence in the box has become way more over the summer. I think his physical conditioning has improved or something, because he is looking much more of a centre forward now. But I still have question marks over him. And as I said after the Manchester United match, is he a striker for a top team, or is he the Danny Welbeck of this world, or kind of an 8th or 9th place good solid centre forward? But can he lead the line for a top Premier League club like Chelsea? Like he was doing it against Sheffield United and the week before against Norwich. Can he do it against a slightly better team that the likes of Wolves will be, who will bully him? Like they are a solid defensive unit that like doing what they do.
Yeah, this is a big test after playing essentially 2 championship clubs. Yeah, the kind of teams he thrives against, really. Yeah.
And it's a test for Frank Lampard, because
especially because the result against Sheffield United, we 2-0 up at home to Sheffield United and draw to a late
and the
equaliser.
writing being on the wall, as Frank Lampard said, from from the first half. And like, what does that even mean? You're the manager. If the writing's on the wall, you do something about it.
Yeah. But so that was a concerning result. And then just finally we'll wrap up with Watford against Arsenal. Quique Sanchez Flores' his first game. How do you see
like we said, Watford always have the ability to get a win. They share the training ground effectively. I think London Colney is Arsenal's training ground, is right next to Watford's training ground, so they basically shared the same pitches, so they know, the players do know each other very well. That's just a coincidence of where their training facilities are. So they'll know each other. You know, Danny Welbeck is returned to Arsenal already. I can't really see beyond Arsenal winning this, because a lot of their players did have a break. Aubameyang had a break there. I don't know about Lacazette, how he's doing. I didn't actually look into the French squad that much after Pogba pulled out of it. But I think this will be another run out for that front three of Pepe, Lacazette and Aubameyang. And against, no offence to Watford, but a weaker defence than maybe Arsenal played against so far this season, they might have a few goals in them, and I think Arsenal will win this one.
Some interesting Saturday kickoff games, and obviously we'll have the Champions League to look forward to then the week after.
Yeah.
But that'll do us for this week on the show. Thank you for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be back again next week. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget you can tell family and friends about the show. Spread the word of the Total Football Takeover. You can also follow us on social media at the TF Pod on Twitter and Total Football Pod on Instagram. We can also be found on podcast services including Spotify by searching Total Football Podcast. The more the merrier. That's what we always say.